and I didn't bother with it. See, I knew that you'd be concerned.
I'm going to use my photographic memory. Toilet has one.
Okay, good job.
All right, everybody, circling, Patty's circling.
All right, Jeff, blow us away.
I don't know about that. This would be about programming.
I heard it wasn't
How
about
many
guys have worked here?
Look, he's looking at me like,
How many guys have
You
worked here?
can't help it.
I'll keep them away from you.
I've been working here about 10 years. I started working here about 1999, and when I was hired, I was a Cold Fusion programmer. I was hired and interviewed as a Cold Fusion programmer, and when I was hired by Andy and Steve, the decision was made at that point that we would use Cold Fusion as our programming language. At the time, Cold Fusion was sharing the market with ASP. ASP was actually Microsoft's response to Cold Fusion. Microsoft started the ASP project as a competitive response to the market that Cold Fusion actually created. Cold Fusion was created in 1995 as a CGI application by a guy named Jeremy Allaire, who wrote it all by himself. It was one person writing an application as a way to access a database. That was it. Jeremy Allaire was looking for a way to create web pages that could speak to databases. That was all the project was at the time. It was 1995. He was one guy. Him and his brother formed a company called Allaire, and they produced Cold Fusion up to about version 3.5 for about 3 or 4 years until they were bought by Macromedia. Macromedia purchased Allaire and took over Cold Fusion and started rewriting it in Java, because at the time Cold Fusion could only work on Windows. All right, this is the infancy of the web. This is a long time ago, and Cold Fusion really only worked on one platform, and that was Windows. Internet Explorer, or Internet Information Services, which was the web server for Windows at the time. But there are a lot of other web servers out there. There was Apache, and there were some other things out there. And so when Macromedia took it over, they decided to rewrite it from the ground up so that it would run on other platforms, and it became more open and more able to be run on things like Apache and under Java and things of that nature. So it was run by Allaire and managed by Macromedia for several years until Adobe bought Macromedia. One of the reasons why Adobe bought Macromedia was because Macromedia had worked over the interim from the time that they purchased Cold Fusion from Allaire, and from the time that they purchased Allaire to the time that they were purchased by Adobe. Their main focus was getting Flash and Cold Fusion to talk together. All right? They had a product called Flash that could create dynamic websites. They could create animations, that could create real rich experiences for people. Okay? These were websites that did stuff and had animated interfaces and had interfaces that moved and did things. And the real dream would have been if there was a way that you could have those front end, those animated front ends, talk to databases for their data. So the focus of Macromedia for the time that they purchased Allaire until the time that they were purchased by Adobe was to figure out a way and to create a streamlined process by which Flash and Cold Fusion could talk to one another. When they were purchased by Adobe, that was the reason why Adobe purchased Macromedia. It wasn't for Freehand, it wasn't for Dream or Director, it wasn't for any of the other products that they had. It was mainly for Cold Fusion and Flash. The rest of the stuff was pretty much icing on the cake for Adobe. Now Adobe's taken over the product, and they've released version 8 of the product under the Adobe umbrella, and they've been working on version 9 of the product. Version 9 should be released this fall. The thinking is that version 9 will probably be released around October for the Max conference this October. There's going to be new development tools for Cold Fusion. There are going to be a release of some tools that have been in the works for about a year now that will allow developers like Yelena and myself to develop even more robust applications and talk to more of the Adobe product line. You know, there's the idea that they're going to begin to start integrating all of these in a sort of creative suite of products for developers and designers, blurring the lines between what everybody in the agency does. Designers will be wearing more of a developer hat, developers will be wearing more of a designer hat, and the focus will be on the experience. The focus will be on creating rich user experiences. All right? That's what we're all about, and that's what all of this is about, and that's what this entire presentation is about experiences. It's about creating experiences for your users, and creating experiences for your clients, and creating experiences that facilitate their businesses and facilitate their business goals. That's what we're trying to do. And the hope is that this presentation will enable you to walk out of this room with more of an understanding of what our primary tool for developing these experiences is in the agency. This is a tool that Elena and myself have used now for going on 6 or, Elena's probably been using it for about 3 or 4 years. I've been using it for around 12 years. So this is a really robust set of tools, and I'm hoping that over the next, 30 minutes or so, I can turn you on to some things that Cold Fusion does that you may not have thought that it did, or you may not have known that it did, and demonstrate some sites and some capabilities of Cold Fusion that will allow you to go out and talk to your clients, to your coworkers, to your friends, to everybody, and have a better understanding about what we can create with this tool, and what our capabilities are internally with this tool.
Jeff, just in real simple terms, explain for the group the difference between a website that's database driven versus one that's not.
Part 1, some learning.
Is that
All right.
planned?
Now, I really struggled with this because the focus is not on technical things. I didn't want to bog this discussion down with technical discussions, but I realized that you need a foundation of at least a basic understanding of what Steve's talking about. Cold Fusion creates dynamic pages. Now that means a lot to me, but it might not mean a lot to you. That might not resonate with you, and you might not have a framework of understanding of what a dynamic page is. So I thought I would begin by saying that Cold Fusion was a response to a static web. All right? Before Cold Fusion existed in 1995, the web was primarily static. Okay? A static web is one where, all right, Cold Fusion is middleware. All right? The invention of Cold Fusion was to inject middleware into a process that didn't have middleware before. All right? Static pages, no middleware. Dynamic pages, middleware. It'll become evident as we go forward what that is. All right? All right, step 1, a browser and a server. All right? That's the browser. We'll call it the client. All right? This is the server. We'll call it the server. All right? The browser makes the request. All right? The browser makes the request. The browser initiates the request. The browser is the one that asks for the web page. All right? The browser asks the web page from the server. The server says, yeah, let me check and see if I have that page. All right? The server has the page. The server hands it back to the browser. The browser takes the page and says, thanks, I'm going to display that page.
Could you dumb this down even further?
And the browser displays the page.
This is good stuff.
That's a pretty static web. There's no interaction with anything. The browser requests a page. The server sends the page to the browser. The browser displays it. What you need to understand is that the browser initiates the request. The browser takes the page, and the browser is responsible for displaying the page, not the server. The server just hands the stuff off to the browser. A lot of stuff happens in the browser. The browser is important. That's why browser differences, that's why you take into account browser differences, and why there are so many browsers is because the browsers are important, and different browsers behave in different ways.
That's
All
why
right?
some stuff works on Foxfire and some stuff works only on the other one.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Different browser implementations. Browsers are implemented in different ways. All right, but essentially, a browser asks the client for a page, and the server sends the page to the client. The browser is the client, and the client displays the page. Some browsers display pages differently. That's just the way that the browsers work. If a page looks different, that's because the browser is displaying the page different, not because of anything on the server, right?